now it stops raining.
Okay, we're ready to go. A little pre-roll. All right, so this is part 3 of my hand modeling series. On the classroom server, the folder that you would want to grab if you wanted to just grab it and follow along from where I am would be Maya Human Hand Part 3. In this folder I have where we left off, which is the level 2 and 3 mesh that we did last week in class. And then I've included in here some hand reference, which are basically hands in kind of more of a fine art poses, which are kind of what you want to do for this assignment. It's tempting to do a really aggressive pose, like a thumbs up or an okay or a hang loose type of pose, but nobody really wants to see that. That basically, if you did that, you wouldn't be taken seriously just because it's kind of a zany, silly pose. Now, we're not opposed to doing a bunch of different poses. If you wanted to do a pose sheet, then it would be appropriate to include some of those. But if you're just doing one, which is what we're doing for this assignment, you really want to stick with something like this, where it's just kind of a hand at rest. So I showed you guys in class, you won't see it on the video, but the way that works is you just take your hand and you shake it out, and then you just kind of lay it on something. And that is kind of an awesome fine art pose for you to try to strive for. And so in here, I just given you a few, so if you don't want to go through that legwork, this is probably a little bit too dynamic, I think, although this would work well because everyone's familiar with the Michelangelo's David's Hand of God. And so either one of these is okay, but if you wanted me to choose, I would pick this one because it's a little bit more subdued than this one. And then we have that one, which is totally fine. And then this would be basically that pose just turned upside down. So what you can do is pose it like this, model it out, and then do another one with it flipped, and that usually looks pretty dynamic. So, and then I grabbed one female hand because we have one girl in the class. And yeah, if you wanted to do a more female pose, that's awesome. All right, so what we want to do with our model now is I told you guys that at some point we were going to pose it. So I want to show you a number of ways that you can pose the model at level 3. So right now we're at level 3, and this is kind of optimal level of resolution for us to do posing. Because if we go ahead and subdivide this guy one more time, I'll just do it to show you. So if I subdivide this one more time, what happens is I end up with all of these edges and vertices, and it becomes harder to pose it. We end up with kind of like too much going on, and it actually makes it harder work to pose it than doing it in level 3. So I'm going to remove that by just putting in a 0 here. The other thing we want to do is we've probably been accumulating quite a bit of history here. So if I look here under the inputs, whenever I see something under the inputs, that's a history item. And when I see it this large, that is a ton of history items. So it's a good idea at this point, before we start posing the mesh, to select it and get rid of all this stuff, because this just slows down the process. So the way we get rid of all that is by selecting the object, make sure you're in object mode, and then say edit, delete by type, history. And now I have deleted all the history, and now this model is going to handle a lot better. Okay, so ways to pose the mesh are this. This one is probably the most complicated, and I don't advocate using it, but I will show you just in case you're someone who's interested in doing rigging later. We can actually draw bones, and I'm not going to rig the whole hand because it takes a while to do so. And you can put bones at each knuckle. So there's a knuckle there. There is, it's hard to tell from this angle because it's been subdivided. I'm just going to guess. So I think there's a knuckle right there. And then there's a knuckle right there. And then we draw another bone right out the tip of the finger, and then I hit enter. And so this is intended to work just like a bone in your hand. And then what you have to do is you have to line this thing up from the side. So I made it, it's lined up from the top, and then now I would need to move these guys a little bit. You want to put a little bit of a bend in them so that they orient the right way. There we go. And then now what you can do is I'm going to turn on X-ray here. X-ray joints so that I can see the joints through there. Now what I would do is I would select that hierarchy of bones, and then I would select the mesh. And then under rigging, I would say skin, and the type of skin that I want to use is called where did it go? I think it's called interactive bind skin. Okay, cool. Interactive bind skin is kind of cool because it allows you to select a joint, and then this little capsule here will affect the influence. So when it's red, it's going to be 100% influence. When it is yellow, it's orange and yellow, it's going to be like probably 60, 40, 30, 10, something like that. And I can grab this thing. Right now it's kind of too giant, and I want to scale it. And I thought I could. It's weird. But it's not letting me scale it for some reason. I wonder if my graphics card is screwing up. Here. There we go. I gotta scale it like this. Okay, so I can scale this thing by grabbing these nodes. And if you shift click, you can change the front of the capsule. So I can make these smaller. If you grab these, you can scale them up and down. You can grab these and scale them up and down. But the way this thing works is wherever you have a bone, you can change the influence. So I want this one to go kind of like all the way up to the next bone, and then I'm going to select the next bone. And this guy's way too big because it's influencing all the other fingers. So I'm going to scale it down. I want to say that it used to let you scale using the scale tool, and I really wish that was in existence because this thing's a little bit cumbersome without it. All right, and you can move these capsules, and what they basically do is they're going to tell the finger to deform. So you can see there that I have too much influence, right? So if I want to change that, I have to grab this capsule and I have to shrink it down so that it only applies to that knuckle. There we go. And I'm still getting too much deformation, and it's got to be this one. So see that knuckle ahead is going all the way into that back knuckle. So when I was rotating the front, it was also rotating the back at the same time. So I'm going to make this guy a lot smaller. And I'll pull that up, pull that up. And these things are pretty intuitive. So if you just start playing with it, they're pretty easy to figure out. I don't know why I can't move that one now, though. As soon as I say that, of course, I can't figure out how to do it. There it is. So you can grab the back and you can move it. Hold down shift and you can scale the ends. There we go. So you kind of want it like red right on the joint. And then you can also orient it. So there we go. Now I'm going to bend that back knuckle again. And we'll be able to see that. And you can, what's cool about these is you can actually bend it. And then you can go into the capsule and you can tweak it right there while it's posed. So see that? I can be like, okay, that thing looks about right there. See how the skin is kind of folding? I can pull that back. I can change where the fold goes. And then here, I'm going to rotate this one, this joint. And it's going too far because this capsule is way too big. They all got way too big right out the gate. So we had to scale them down. All right, but you can see just by me fiddling with this that this is taking a while, right? So my advice on this is to not use this because you guys are noobs. And while you're noobs, you want to use a simpler system for posing because it's going to be a lot easier and it's going to get you home a lot faster. All right, so I'm going to grab this one. And I haven't used this thing in a while, so I'm not as strong with it as I was at one point. But what I hope I'm demonstrating here is just how much time this is taking. That's all I wanted to do. So it's taken way too long. So, and it's also screwing up my hand from, in order to do this properly, I actually have to build a skeleton for the entire hand that goes from here all the way up to each finger. I then have to set this thing up, then I have to tweak all the capsules, and then you can pose. But I'm going to show you an easier way to do this. So I'm going to delete the bones, which is going to snap my hand back to its original pose. And then I'm going to say edit delete by type history to get rid of all that. That's called skinning, what I was doing right there. Skinning is basically where you create like a little puppeteer system, and you can deform the mesh based on an armature inside. But again, it takes a real long time to set that up. And there's an entire class devoted to that called rigging, where that's all you do. And it kind of takes that long to get good at it. So there's a better way to do it. So for us, here's what I advocate. First of all, get some reference. I want to show you that you can also bring your reference into Maya. And this is a very sound way to approach working. So I'm going to go back to modeling mode. And I'm going to make a plane. And then I'm going to scale it up. And I'm going to rotate it up. So what you can do is you can actually bring a reference picture right into Maya, and then that makes it so you don't have to keep flipping back and forth between a web browser and the software, and you can kind of like orient this however you want. And I'm going to right click and say assign new material, and then I'm going to assign a picture for one of those reference images that I got. Oh, sorry. I want to do a Lambert material first. I was jumping the gun there. New Lambert material, and then I'm going to assign a file node. And the one I liked was, I think I'll do this one. Everyone knows that one. Okay. Rotate this. And then I want to make sure that I scale that out so I'm not messing up the proportion. All right, so I'm going to do the David's hand of God, and I'm going to do this hand. Okay, so I'm looking at this finger, and let's say I want to pose that. I'm not going to worry about the wrist right away, although maybe I should. All right, I'll do the wrist. All right, so I'm going to do the wrist. So basically, it starts kind of like this, where the hand is, it got frozen when I skinned it, so I'm going to unfreeze that. Let's see here. Unlock. It got locked, so I'm going to unlock it. Okay, I'm going to move the pivot back to the wrist here. And so it's kind of like this. First of all, his wrist is like up in the air a little bit. Maybe it's to the side. Okay, and then I want to take the wrist and I want to kind of like bend it down a little bit. So the way this works is I'm going to start using my lasso selection, which is this guy. And it makes it easier to select a bunch of points in a controlled way. So I'm going to select it. And I'm also working kind of in 3 dimensions now, where I no longer have a world axis. So that's why I want to start using the wand here for my 3D selection, because I'm going to kind of go like that. And then I'm going to deselect. And see, I'm trying to like just basically select the wrist along that line right there. And then I'm going to deselect the next row here. That's pretty good right there. And then maybe select, oops. I am holding shift to add to, control and shift to add to the selection. And then deselecting is control. There we go. That's what I wanted. Okay, now that I have the vertices selected that I want, I'm going to hit the E key, And I'm also going to hit the B key for soft selection. And then I hit the E key for rotate. And then if I hold down the D key, I can actually move this pivot point and place it right inside of that wrist. So that's D as in David. And what I'm doing is I'm temporarily moving that pivot point for these points so that they're right there inside of that wrist. And now I can do this. And see that? I'm getting a decent break there. And so I made this look easier than it is. But that's what I'm here to do. All right, so I'm going to move the wrist a little bit. So I'm trying to angle the hand. The next one I would do is I would come in here to the finger. And so I'm going to go, okay, now I need to grab the finger. And the way this works is we kind of do one joint at a time. So I'm going to select everything, including that first knuckle there. And then you just kind of deselect. And then I'm going to hit E again, which puts me in rotate mode. And then if I hold down D as in David, that allows me to move my pivot point. And I basically want to move that pivot point to where that bone would be. So, and then I want to orient the pivot point also so that it is in the correct orientation to rotate for that joint. So you can kind of see there, I'm a little bit off. So I'm going to move it. There we go. And I kind of want that rotation axis to come down along that finger as if there's a straight line going right down the finger. Can you guys see that, hopefully? Okay, and then now that I have that, now I can rotate that knuckle just a little bit. And I think I kind of overdid it. So I'm gonna, there we go, just a little bit. And then I want to come down to the next knuckle, which is this one here. And I got a little bit behind it. You kind of want to like select it right on the middle. So see that I'm a little bit too far behind. So I want to select it like right about there. And then what I can do is control click and deselect all these other points. And then I got a little bit of a problem here because I have the right selection on my finger, but my soft selection is bleeding into the other object. So I'm going to readjust this so that it doesn't bleed into the other finger. Okay, now that I have that done, now I'm going to hit E for rotate. I'm going to hold down D for David, and it has this new thing where it'll actually align to a face, which I started off hating, but I'm starting to like it now because you can move it and, well, now it doesn't want to do it. You can move it. Let's see. Why did that work and now it's not working? Ah, there it is. It's Alt. No. Must bone up on this new tool. Okay, so I'll have to figure that out. You guys can look it up. But it's called align. It's a temporary alignment. It'll actually align to the polygons. And if I'm not using the D key, if I'm using the insert, I believe it's control. So if I go insert, there we go. I believe it's control. Aligns it, but no, that's not working. All right, forget it. I'm just going to manually do it. So manually doing it, you just grab these little points. And again, you want that little vector there, the blue one, to go straight down the finger. So I'm going to grab this and rotate it a little bit. There, that looks pretty good. And then I'm going to put the joint right inside that knuckle. And now I'm ready to rotate. So I'm going to hit E again to rotate it. And you can see that it's a little bit far behind with the soft select. So I'm going to reduce it. There we go. And what I'm looking for on my pose is I want there to be a natural fold there because when I crease my finger, the skin is actually going to overlap the other skin and it's going to create a little crease point. And so that's why I was adjusting that soft selection so that I get that natural crease point there between the flesh of the finger. And so That's pretty good. And then the final one is I'm going to come down into this guy, the very last knuckle. Again, I'm trying to go in the middle, so right before this joint here. And I'm holding down Control plus Shift, so that's selection. If you do Control, it'll deselect, which is kind of annoying. But if you do Control plus Shift, it'll add to the selection. And that's what I wanted to do. Okay, so there I have everything selected right at that halfway, right at the joint. I'm going to hit E to get into rotation mode. And then I'm going to hit Insert, which puts me in pivot mode. And I want to orient the pivot again so that it goes straight down the finger. That I still haven't figured out this stupid align thing. It's a newer feature, and I wish they just would stop doing things, or if they do it better than what they do. The implementation is, I haven't figured it out. Okay, cool. There we go. I'm gonna now push this joint right up there to the bone. I'm going to hit E to put me back in rotation mode, and now I can crux that finger a little bit. And so I know mine's not quite like it, but there we go. The other thing you want to do with fingers is fingers are not straight. So if you observe your own, what happens is all the fingers, the straightest finger you have is your middle finger. And all the other fingers at the tip will actually bow towards that middle finger. And so what I want to do here is with this tip, I actually want to bow it a little bit towards the other finger. And I should have started with this one too, because it kind of starts early. So I'm going to come in here and go, okay, you know what? I forgot to do that one. So I'm going to move the pivot a little bit. And I'm going to also bend this one in a little bit. This is where I start to like this axis right here, because this axis is actually going to bend the object perpendicular to the camera viewport, and these are going to bend in the direction that they're going. So it might take me a while to reorient that axis, but if I can get my camera perpendicular to the finger and I can grab this axis, I know that I'm actually bending it perpendicular to the camera's view, and I didn't have to go through that other step of aligning everything. So what I wanted to do is with that index finger, I just wanted to, and I kind of overdid it, I over-exaggerated it, but I wanted to bend that and skew that in towards the middle. And then I would do the same thing. Let's see, let's pose the middle finger. So for the middle finger, again, I would do it the same way. I start with this joint here. I grab it all. I'm going to deselect because I don't want to go that deep. Something like that. And then I'm going to use my soft selection. You want to be careful of this where, see, it's bleeding into the neighboring fingers. So I don't want to go into the neighboring fingers. So maybe something like that is pretty good. And then I'm going to hit E. I'm going to hit the insert key to move my pivot. I can move my pivot right back there. I'm going to sink it in the joint. And then this time, instead of placing the pivot perfectly, I'm actually just going to use this yellow axis, which is going to rotate perpendicular to the camera. And I'm going to be a little bit faster in my rotation. And so middle finger in this image is like a little bit deeper. So I'm going to go like that. And then I'm going to go up the next joint. And so I didn't use the lasso select this time because, again, I was just pretty much perpendicular right down on this. So I knew I was going to get a pretty good selection. And I'm going to do that again. So I want one row back. I like that one. Okay, same deal. I'm going to hit insert. Insert just puts me in pivot mode. I first have to tell it what I want to do, and I want to rotate it. So I'm going to hit E to rotate it, and now I'll hit insert. And now I can, again, go perpendicular to the camera, place my joint right there. I'm going to go into the side to make sure that that joint's in the middle of that finger. And then now I'm going to hit E, and I'm going to use the yellow axis, which is perpendicular to my camera, and I got a much easier time there bending that finger. And then that was so much faster than what I was previously doing. And then when I do this one more time here, I'm going to get perpendicular to this finger, select it, deselect a couple of these. This is where now I need that lasso because I can't quite get the right selection. So grab the lasso. All right, cool, that's pretty good. And then I'm going to hit insert. First I got to tell it what I want to do with E, which is rotate. Then now I can hit insert and I can pivot this thing, move it right to the middle of my joint, get out of pivot mode, and again I'm going to use that yellow axis, which is, it will rotate perpendicular to the camera. So all I have to do is get that camera on the side of that finger, and it's going to allow me to pose it. And so in this case that finger was slightly raised like that, and so I'm going to raise it. And then so on and so forth. I'm not going to pose the entire thing, but that's basically how it goes. I kind of did the index finger and the middle finger, and then you got to do that same operation for all. I will do the thumb though, because the thumb's a little trickier. So thumb here is, I'm going to go into vertex mode. Again, I want to use the lasso, and I'm going to come in here and be like, okay, that's my thumb. And I want to grab the entire, I call this the chicken wing, because that all kind of moves together. Whoops. That's not bad. And then I got a little bit too much on the back side, so I'm going to deselect that. I'll do that in a view where I don't select. There we go. That's good. Okay, cool. Let me deselect those two. Good, good, good. And then now I'm going to soft select it a little bit. And then same deal, I want to tell it what I want to do. So I'm going to hit E for rotate. And then I'm going to hit insert for pivot. And I'm going to move the pivot to basically where that bone is, which is somewhere back in here. And then I'm going to hit insert. And then again, I'm going to use the perpendicular to camera, which is the yellow axis there. And then I can use it again here. I'm going to get perpendicular on it and rotate that in. And what I want to be careful of is this, where I'm basically flattening that out too much. And so in this case, I probably over selected the chicken wing here. So I'm going to undo those poses, and I'm going to deselect some of those verts so that I get a softer transition there. All right. And then I'll try that again. All right, so in the pose, my reference, the thumb has kind of like collapsed this way. Whoops. There we go. That's much more natural. Very good. It's not too bad. Maybe I could deselect those, but I don't want to get this perfect. I just want to show you the technique. And then you guys have to spend the time to be perfect. Okay, so I got it kind of collapsed a little bit more. Then I'd come in here to this knuckle, deselect some of the webbing there, Shift plus Control to add to. And then, so this is my next bone. I'm going to hit insert after hitting E for rotate. And now I'm going to use the rotate perpendicular to camera. And I got a little bit too much action there, so I'm going to deselect that. So I'm placing that joint where the bone would be. There we go. And now I am rotating this guy. Again, you can also move. You gotta be careful with it though, that you don't screw it up too much, but you can see I needed just a little bit of movement there. And that worked out much better than me trying to rotate. And then after you pose something too, you gotta, like, if it distorts it too much, you got to go in there and kind of undistort it. So there's a little bit of modeling involved. All right, and then I'll do one last thing. So this thumb here at this knuckle also points inward just a little bit, I think. No, it goes out. So I'm going to come in here and go. I'm going to hit E for rotate. I'm going to hit insert to move the joint. I'm going to put the joint right on that knuckle. Hit insert, and then now I'm going to use perpendicular to camera to kind of, and I've got a little bit too aggressive soft select there, so I'm going to tone down my soft select. There we go. And that's kind of the gist of it, like that. So I'm a little bit off, but with more time, I'd be able to get this better. So we pose the wrist, we pose the thumb. Thumb's still pretty far off. I need to do that a little bit more. This one's close-ish, and then this one's not too bad. And then after you're done posing everything, then it's a good idea to come back into the mesh. And I like to just use the soft selection. So soft selection, come in and kind of re-firm up some of your modeling. So I'm going to be like, yeah, I want that little divot there. I want to fix the palm a little bit. It kind of over-eroded. What else? I want to give this knuckle here a little bit more definition. And what we're doing with this is we're just kind of going in and fixing the proportion where things kind of got overly done. On this one, you can see this kind of got overly bulged. So this would be a prime candidate for me coming in here and going, okay, dude, that got overly bulged, so I'm going to flatten that out a little bit manually. And there we go. So now we're going for the final stage of production. Now, mind you guys, I did not pose this thing all the way. We don't have enough time for that. I only did the first 3 fingers and the wrist. And now the next phase of production is I'm going to hide the reference. Now we get to subdivide this more and actually start sculpting it further. So now what I'm going to do, the next phase is I'm going to duplicate this. I'm going to call it level 4. Cool. And then I'm going to take this guy and I'm going to make a layer for him. And I'm just going to call it hand pose. Oops. So that's kind of an extra level. All right. And now for this guy, we are ready to start sculpting away. And to sculpt away, we want to subdivide it one more time. So I'm going to say mesh smooth. There we go. We got a lot more resolution to deal with now. So at this level of detail, we can go back into the sculpt brush. So I'm going to select the model. I do want to make sure before I start sculpting on it that I delete any history, because all that history slows down the sculpting tool. So I'm going to select it and say edit, delete by type history. So once I'm happy with my pose, then I can delete the history, and now we can start doing the final phase of production, which is really sculpting the crap out of this thing. So I'm going to go into the sculpting tool and I'm going to grab my brush. I'm going to change the vector. The vector is the strength of the brush by holding down M as in Mary and left mouse clicking. I don't want a big strength because this brush is additive and I'm painting with a mouse. I'm sculpting with a mouse. So I want to set it up to where each successive stroke is going to just add a small amount of detail, and then I'm going to add the detail by basically layering the strokes right on top of each other. So you can see how that kind of works. All right, so what I want to do is now, at this stage, we can start adding better tendons. So I'm going to, tendons kind of start right here and go down the back side of the knuckle. And And I'm going to be a little bit aggressive. I am sculpting with a bar of soap. That's what this is called when you're sculpting with a mouse. This is not the best way to do it, but I know plenty of people who can do it this way, including myself. So it's effective, but it's not really a gentleman's way to do it. This is more of a caveman technique, but not everyone has a Wacom. So if you don't, it's basically a series of embossing and smoothing. So we emboss and then we smooth. So I got that first tendon in there. Let's do another one. So I'm going to come back in here. Smooth. Do this one. Smooth it. Okay, so you can see we got a little bit better tendon action. At this resolution, you might be able to start blocking in the veins. So I have very veiny hands. So on the backs here, we can come in and be like, okay, then I also have a vein that kind of runs over the tendons. Now, we don't have enough resolution in here to actually make the vein look good. This is more like a placeholder for myself later at the next resolution, where I'm like, okay, I know I blocked a vein in there. Oh, there it is. And I can pick that back up. So you don't want to obsess over any of the details you put in that are very fine, and the veins are a little bit finer. At this stage, the tendons are kind of what you want to go for. So I got another tendon here on the side of my hand. And somehow I lost my brush. Totally weird. There we go. All right, and remember that the first brush here is emboss. So a stroke is going to make it stand up. It's going to bring it out. A shift stroke is going to smooth it, and then a control stroke is going to allow you to push in on either side. So I way overdid that. But that doesn't look that great, but I'm kind of, again, I'm exaggerating so that you guys can see it. All right, cool. At this point, I could start working on my wrist bone a little bit more. I could definitely improve these tendons. I could improve on the padding here. Oops. You can start cutting into the shape a little bit. So I'm able to like cut that. And then at this stage I can start blocking in like my lifelines and my creases on my hand. You're not going to get them to look good because you don't have enough resolution. But what you can do is you can basically start blocking in the locations for these things. So I'm going to add another, I don't know what all these lines are. It's like the lifeline, there's something, the prosperity line, something else. I'm not into palm reading. All right, but I want to kind of start blocking those in. And I can beef this up a little bit here. My thumb got a little bit flattened there. On the webbing, we could start exaggerating the webbing a little bit. I do like at this resolution to start detailing your knuckles out a little bit better. So you can do that over here. Too much on that one. So this is where the vector comes in handy. You can really reduce that. So if you're getting too much relief, you just pull that baby down. There we go. That's a little bit better. All right, knuckles. And so this is kind of, I'm going to speed this up because I don't want to do the whole thing, but this is kind of what you want to do. You want to increase the tendons detail. You want to start blocking in the subtler details a little bit with some placeholders. And you really want to detail out things like the pads, the knuckles. I could do these knuckles too. I guess I'm going to improve this just a little bit. All right, cool. And so now you can see that with just very little effort, it's really starting to look more and more like an organic form. And so now I'm going to fast forward to level 4. Level 5. So we're going to go to level 5. And in order to do that, I'm going to make a copy. Should save this before I lose it. So this one is levels 4 through, we'll say 6. 6 is going to be where you're just kind of done, and these computers we're working on won't go any further, and that's when we call it a day. All right, so I want to go to level 5 though, so what I'm going to do is make a duplicate, make a new layer. I'm going to call this one level 5. And at level 5, we have some more tricks, which are kind of fun. That kind of make, they're a little bit magic, really. So I'm going to say mesh, smooth. And you see that detail? That is a lot of detail. So the sculpting tool is going to work better at this resolution than it ever has before. And it's going to allow you to add finer detail. So the way to think of sculpting is that, and with each level of detail, is that when you go to a successive level, you add as much detail as that level will hold. Okay? And it's based on how many vertices there are. So, and I'm kind of giving you guys guides. I'm basically saying like tendons, right? I said at level 4, you could start to give the hint of veins, but the veins won't look very good. You can start doing like lifelines and stuff at 4, but they're not going to look great, but you can start blocking them in. All right, so at this level, at level 5, we can actually start doing the veins. So see how I have my vein kind of blocked in there? So now I can be like, okay, dude, I know where the vein goes because I blocked it in on the last level. But now I can go in there and really, really detail that guy out. So see that? And now it's going to start looking better. Veins also kind of come and go. So with the smooth tool, what I can do is I drew that vein like all the way along the back. But on my hand, the vein will like pop out and then it'll bury itself. So you can do that. You can be like, okay, with the smooth tool, I'm going to make that vein kind of disappear into the skin. And so the vein kind of comes and goes, and that looks a little bit more realistic. All right, we can also start detailing out the crease points. So the lifelines and all that, I'm going to come in here with the control, and I'm going to come in and kind of botch that one a little bit. Let's try that again. That's how mine goes. It kind of runs right through my pad. And then I got another one here. So what I'm doing is I'm holding down control, and control is pushing. And so, and then what I do is after I'm done, I smooth just the edges. I'm not smoothing in the valley. I'm smoothing kind of at the peaks. And then I'm going to do my last one, which is I think that's the lifeline. And then I can smooth on the edge of it, like so. And you can see here. Now when you see this, that kind of tearing, so there's these little like striated lines, that's telling you that, hey dude, you don't really have enough resolution at this level of detail to truly add that thing. When it starts tearing, those are basically polygons that are kind of ripping. And so at that point you might be like, okay, they're ripping, so I'm just going to smooth them. And then what I'm going to do is I have them blocked out so I know where they go. And at the next resolution, that's when I'm going to go in there and knife that in. All right, so I'm going to smooth that out. Another cool thing that you can do here is at this resolution is you can add the creases on the undersides of the knuckles. So knuckles, it's tempting to be like, yeah, my knuckle just has that one crease there. But at that middle knuckle, there's usually two creases. So at this resolution, it is great to start cutting in the second crease. And for this one, I want to show a new technique. So I'm going to cut this crease, and I'm kind of over making it deeper than it needs to be, because I want to show you a new tool on the sculpting tool. So if you cut something in and the resolution kind of isn't there, you can see it's kind of tearing. You can kind of force this thing to work by using something called pinch. So this brush right here is called pinch tool. And what it'll do is if it has a valley and then two peaks on either side, it will attempt to actually squeeze those guys together. But it needs a lot more energy. So for this one, I'm going to open up the tool settings, and I'm going to jack the strength up to like 100, and watch this magic. See what it did? It creates a nice little crease right there. And it's pretty inexpensive. It's kind of easy to do. I can do the same thing on the lifelines and stuff, but I don't want to do that just yet. I would do that, I'm going to show you in the next resolution. So for this one though, it works pretty well. So I could be like, okay, wow, that worked great. Joel was like, no, thanks, man. That was a solid. That'll never happen. You guys will never thank me for anything. See how jaded I am. All right, so we're going to come in here and do that again. So I'll show you one more time. I'm just control clicking, and I'm going to show you how dirty you can be with it. So I'm being pretty dirty, pretty unclean. That looks nasty. But watch what happens when I use the pinch. So I'm going to go pinch. Open it up, make sure my strength is stupid, 100. Make my brush bigger than that valley, and just paint it right on the middle. And you see that? It makes you into a better person than you are. And I got a nice crease there for like 0 effort. All right, cool. Where else can I use that? I can absolutely use that on the knuckles. So I can come in here and go, okay, I'm going to do the knuckles. I'm going to do one way and the other one another way, because I like you guys to have multiple techniques. So I'm gonna this time go into the sculpt tool. Actually, no, I want to do that same way. Sorry. I'm gonna come in here and make this brush really small. I'm gonna maybe increase the intensity. And what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna paint the folds. So I'm gonna come in here and go Control. Okay, I have a crease right there. I have another one that kind of goes like this. And I have another one that kind of goes like this. And what I'm doing here is I'm actually trying to do too many of these at once. So I'm going to undo. I want to do this one at a time. So I have a crease that goes right there. And then now I'm going to come in here with the pinch tool. And I'm going to pinch that guy together, giving me one fold. All right, I'm going to do it again. Now I'm going to draw the next fold. And my next fold goes like this. And then I'm going to pinch it. And see that? We're starting to get the detail on the top of the knuckle. All right, I want to show you another way that we can do that. And so the geo kind of looks a little bit messed up. But another way we can do that is we can actually use the paint selection tool. So I'm going to come into paint selection. I'm going to turn off soft selection. And soft selection won't turn off until you're in regular selection for some reason. Paint selection, you will not be able to disable soft selection. It's kind of annoying. There we go. So deselect. Now if I go into paint selection, I can select the actual vertices that I want to pinch. So I'm going to just come in here and be like, okay, these are my knuckle creases. And then I maybe have okay. And then what I want to do is I'm actually just going to move those down. What do you guys think? Do you think I'm going to have enough resolution to pull that off? How's that looking? Not that great, right? So what does that tell you? If you go to add a detail at a level of detail and you just can't get it in there, so you're looking at it, it doesn't look like you have enough geometry to make the folds on the knuckles. What should I do? I want you to answer that one. Well, here, let's just find out what happens. If I try to pinch this, let's see. So I'm going to go in here to the pinch tool. This time I want to turn on my wireframe. So I'm going to show it. And I'm going to pinch these. But what if I'm pinching it though and it just doesn't look that good? What do you think the problem is? You need what? I'll help you. I was hoping you guys would answer that. I need more resolution. So I'm going to turn this off. So, oops. So basically what I'm trying to do here is I'm trying to add something that I don't have enough detail to add. So like it kind of looked okay here, but it's also kind of soft. See that? I get a little bit of knuckle detail. So in order to get the knuckles in, I'm going to have to subdivide my mesh one more time, and I'm going to have to go to level 6. So at level 5, I just don't have enough edges to add those very, very fine cracks on the tops of the knuckles. So I'm going to duplicate this one more time. I'm going to assign it to a new layer, and I'm going to call it level 6. And level 6 is probably where I want you guys to stop for an intro class, for sure. I want to subdivide this guy one more time, so I'm going to say mesh smooth. And then I also want to delete the history, so I'm going to say edit, delete by type history. And now I'm going to have a lot more resolution, and this is where you want to add the true fine detail, like the cracks on the tops of the knuckles, micro cracks on the bottom of the hand. Now we're going to be able to get it. So, but I really like for this, I find it very easy to use the paint selection because you can come in here to paint vertex. First, I gotta just unselect everything. Paint vertex, and you can actually just paint select the right on top of the mesh, and I find this to be very easy, and it's very easy for newbies to do too, so that's why I like this technique. So if you're like, man, I just don't get the sculpting tool, I freaking hate the sculpting tool, there's another way to do this. I can come in here and just select. I kind of don't want, I kind of overdid it there, and I have like 2 rows. 2 rows is no good. You only just need 1 row of vertices. That's perfect right there. I'll add like 1 more. And then you can just brute force this. So I'm just going to pull those down. All right. And then right now they're going to look kind of messy, but it does look like the cracks on top of the knuckles. But now I have my magic heal button, which is the pinch, and I have my brush a little bit too big right now. You want the brush to be like just slightly larger than that valley. And then you can come in here and it'll pull all of those together. And then when you end up with artifacts, you can just hit it with the smooth brush. So like, and I'm just holding down shift and smoothing it out. So where I end up with like kind of too much going on, I can smooth that out. And there we go. I get the tops of the knuckles. And then this works really well. At this resolution, all of those really nice cracks on the underside of the palm are going to be so much easier to do. So I can come in here and knife that stuff in. So I'm just control clicking, knifing it in, and then I come back behind with the pinch and check it out. Smooth it to fix transitions. You can make cracks kind of come and go. And then I'll add another one because I blocked these. It's really good to block out your next step in one resolution. And then come behind it in the next. And finish it off. So I'll do this one too. Okay, I knifed those in. Now I'm going to pinch them. Getting a little bit of tearing there, so I'll come in and smooth that out. And that is basically the gist of it. So at level 6, you have enough resolution to get fine cracks in there and pretty much get all the detail you need to wow all the other people who maybe want to learn 3D modeling. Most people will look at this and think that you did that in ZBrush. And then they're always blown away when you can do something in a tool that people wouldn't expect. So if you show them like a really detailed sculpted hand and you're like, yeah, I did that in Maya, they're going to be like, oh my God, I thought you did that in ZBrush. And so this is what I'm trying to show you how to do. And so the homework assignment for tonight is going to be to pose and sculpt. I think I'm going to give you guys 2 days to continue to work on this. So 2 days to take it up to level 6 and sculpt it out and pose it. And then that's it. We're pretty much done with this project.
My question was, what would happen if we move? You're trying to reposition the hand right now, all those cracks and stuff.
Okay, that was a good question. So Michael was saying, what happens if you try to move the hand? Will you like lose all that detail and all those cracks? The answer is no, because if I come over here and say edit, delete by type history, all of that shape gets baked. So now if I want to make a copy of this hand, so I could duplicate it and move it over and flip it over. I like this as a pose for your final turn-in because you're going to detail both sides of the project. So this is a pretty decent presentation here. If you show me like the both sides. There we go.
I'm wondering like if you like bent a finger, like just give it a different pose altogether.
No, you can change that. Yeah.
All the cracks and everything.
Yeah, no problem. Because everything's baked down, so that's it, dude. Did I kill Bandicam? No. Okay, so that's it. So for this is the last part of the assignment. We're going to go all the way out to level 6. We're going to pose the hand and try to get a portfolio grade piece for you guys, to get an internship or whatever. You always want to think about your portfolio at this stage as like something that's a work in progress. So you might think that something you've done is incredibly lame, but employers don't. So like if you want to become like say a student tutor or something here at the campus, they're going to want to see a portfolio. And if you can finish this assignment out nicely and you can show them a nice fine art sculpted hand, you're going to be a lot better off than someone else who's like, I don't have a portfolio. You're going to be able to demonstrate that, yeah, I model in Maya, and here's my recent work. So don't get too snobby on your portfolio is my message there, is whatever your best work is at the moment, publish that. That's your best work. Use that to get you something else. And then when you get better work, you replace that with the better work. So you're always stair-stepping with every assignment you do. You should take everything you're doing very seriously. Everything is cumulative in terms of you advancing yourself in this profession. All right, that's it. So homework is to finish the handoff, and good luck.